My brother was in solitary while in jail. He'd had a dental visit with the jail nurse, and he was awaiting trial on misdemeanor marijuana charges, and he was just 25. He was someone with no concept of consequences, and he absolutely hated authority. When he went to prison at 18 and was told to clean the bathroom, he put the sponges on his hands and knees and just sort of crawled around, just to irritate the corrections officers. I was in high school while he was in prison, and he wrote me in a letter saying, "If I died, would you cry?" I hope so. And that his teachers would ask where the students saw themselves in 10 years, and he said, "I don't see myself in 10 years." His parole didn't go so well, so he finished his 5 years. It was just a multitude of misdemeanors. And then he got a job and happily worked double shifts at a gas station. They loved his work ethic. When the guy he was living with got a girlfriend, she wanted my brother out, so he found some greaseball to live with. Then the drug bust came, and my brother was caught up in it, over marijuana. As he was awaiting his appearance before the court, he had his dental visit, and he'd been caught making hooch in his cell, and he was put into the only cell with no camera. When you're in solitary, you get 1 hour a day to shower and clean your cell under supervision. If you need something like shampoo, you submit a written request. If you're lucky, you get it, eventually. He was known for whistling, tapping, and drumming while in his solitary cell. 11:20 p.m., he asked for the aerosol cleaner. A corrections officer gave it to him. His rig was a rag with a toilet paper holder, and he'd written on his clothes, "You should delete yourself," as a message to the corrections officer because he despised them so much. Around 2 a.m., the aerosol can hit the floor, and the guy in the cell next door started yelling for help. He was dead already, but they called my mother to tell her that he was in critical condition at the hospital. He was on a gurney in the hallway, covered by a sheet. She was just called to identify his body. The officer who gave him the cleaner was not reprimanded, and when they mailed his stuff to us, they included the rag and toilet paper holder. They offered to send us the video of them dragging him out of his cell and doing CPR. A friend's husband started working at that jail as a corrections officer, and he said every night the same whistling, tapping, and drumming kept happening. Everyone heard it. People would ask, "Who's that blonde guy walking around?" Several years after his death, his driver's license was found on the floor of the corrections officer's storage room. I started finding pennies right away after he died. I was having dreams where I told him, "You died," and he didn't believe me. And then eventually they changed, and I'd be excited to see him, and then I'd say goodbye again. And finally in a dream he told me he was ready to go. I still mourn him, and this was over 20 years ago, but I'm still mourning, and occasionally I still find pennies. This is a story about Hilda, my little old lady hospice patient who lived in an Odessa, Texas nursing home. This is also a story about Claude, who was her son, but also my hospice patient, and lived at home in Midland, Texas with his wife, Joni. Yes, Mother Hilda and son Claude were both dying at the same time in 2 separate places 20 miles apart. And poor wife/daughter-in-law Joni was trying to take care of both and doing a great job doing it. Between the two, Hilda the mom and Claude the son, I really expected Claude to just go first. He was confused. He would still get up a little bit, but now he was weak and he just looked sick. I really expected to be seeing him for maybe a couple of weeks before I anticipated him dying. His mother Hilda, all things considered, was doing relatively well. I really thought that I might be seeing her for 2, if not 3 months, maybe even longer. She had been a long-term resident in the nursing home with Alzheimer's. It just continued to take its toll on her to the point where she was almost bedbound. And yes, she stopped eating as much and had been losing weight, and she was very confused. But she was pleasantly confused. I would typically see her twice a week on Tuesdays and Fridays, normally after seeing her son on the same day. And each time I would have to reintroduce myself to her, and We would chat for a while, and sometimes she would tell me the same stories from her youth over and over again, but she never failed to bring a smile to my face. And due to her confusion, she would sometimes just come out with things that really showed her confusion, like, "I'm going to go play baseball at the park this weekend," when obviously just getting out of bed was almost beyond her. But she was an amazingly sweet lady, even if she didn't remember who I was each time and sometimes came out with things that didn't make sense. And like I said, I didn't expect her to die anytime soon. I really thought that she would just continue to slowly decline, and probably in a couple of months I expected her to die peacefully, but sadly to outlive her son. So one Friday, I made my stop to check in on son Claude, and he's doing okay. I make sure his pain is controlled and he's breathing okay. His wife Joni is also doing an amazing job, and I let her know that I'm on my way to see Hilda, and I'll see them back the following week. I drove over to the nursing home, checked in with the staff, and they say Hilda's doing fine, maybe even happier than normal. I'm in a bit of a hurry and running behind, and I know I won't have much time to visit with Hilda today. I go into her room, and she greets me with, "Hi, I'm Hilda." "Hi, Hilda. I'm your nurse, and I was coming by to see how you are today." "Well, I think I'm good." "Are you hungry? Have you eaten?" "Oh, yes, dear. I think I've had some pancakes and sausage." "Oh, very good, Hilda. Do you have any pain today?" "No, I never have any pain." "Who are you?" "I'm your nurse. So I'm going to check your blood pressure and listen to your breathing if that's okay." "Of course, honey. You do what you need to do. But I really don't think I need a doctor or a nurse." I check her vitals. Everything is good. No obvious signs of distress, no pain. Hilda's in great shape, relatively speaking. "All right, Hilda. It looks like you're doing well. I saw Claude and Joni this morning, and they're doing well, and I'll plan on seeing you next week." "Well, honey, my son, the one on 145th Street, said he was meeting up at the gate today at 2. He's taking me home. I won't be here." So, knowing the condition Claude was in, I knew that there was no way he was getting her. And besides, she said 145th Street. There's no numbered streets in Midland, and even Odessa streets don't go to that high. And it was noon now. There's no way even Joni would be coming over to get her. Sweet Hilda, confused as always, but I guess she has something to look forward to. But at least Hilda looked good. I enjoyed my visit with her and was glad that I would be able to keep seeing her for a while more. Okay, Hilda. Well, I'll see you next week, okay?" "Okay, but I won't be here." I gathered my bag and stethoscope, said bye to the nursing home staff, and drove back to Midland to start seeing my afternoon patients. 2:15, I get a text to call Hilda's nursing home. I figured they just need to refill on her medication or something. I call and talk with her nurse, Annie. Hey, it's Hilda. I went to check in on her and she's dead. We'd seen her about 30 minutes earlier and she was fine, and we walked back in and, well, she's just gone." I was shocked. Over the years, I had become really good at predicting when my patients would die, and yes, she was sick, but I never expected her to die that day, or even that week or month. I thought back to her conversation about her son meeting her at the gate. I called Joni's number, and she answered and let her know that it sounded like Hilda had passed. Joni was sad, but not overly surprised. I guess when anyone is 102, it's not a terrible surprise, really. I told her I was going back over to officially pronounce her, and Joni told me that she would meet me. I asked about Claude, and she said that he was fine, and they had just been visiting, and she wasn't sure if she would tell him yet or not. I drove back to the nursing home, checked on Hilda, and sure enough, just like the staff had said, she had passed. Joni showed up just a bit later, and after some hugs, she told Hilda goodbye and that she and Claude loved her. We stepped out into the hall. I told her that I was surprised that it had happened so quickly, but looked like she had gone very peacefully. I told her about our last conversation. Joni, it was strange that she said that she was going to meet her son at the gate at 2. And that's almost exactly when she died. I thought first maybe Claude had died and met her, but it sounds like that's not the case. But then I really think it was just her confusion because she said that her son was on 145th. And you all don't live on 145th, so I guess it was just her confusion talking. And Joni responds saying, "No, she was talking about her other son, Claude's brother. He lived on 145th Street in Lubbock. He died about 5 years ago, and it sounds like he was meeting her at the gate today at 2 to bring her home." I was shocked. Speechless, really. Claude would go on to die a couple of weeks later, and then Joni a couple of years after that. And each time I would think about all of them gathering at the gate to welcome each other home. I live on a 13-acre property in an area of my state where the suburbs turn to rural farmland. My parents live in the main house near our road, while my fiancé and I converted one of the barns on the back half of the property into our house. Our house and another barn are set in a pretty wide clearing/pasture, but beyond that we're surrounded by woods on 3 sides. All of this is to say that we don't get many visitors out here. From the time we moved into the house almost a year ago, there had been some occasions where I get this inexplicable feeling of terror while outside at night. I've lived in the woods my whole life, including in places far, far more remote than here, but I've never had this feeling. The woods are home. In every other place I've lived, they've felt like my woods, but not here. I've repeatedly had the feeling that I'm trespassing on someone else's land, someone who was not happy to have me here. The other night I took my dog out for his last walk. It was around 11 p.m., so it was pitch black outside, the ring of light cast by the floodlights on the side of the house. As I was walking towards the edge of the tree line where my pup likes to do his business, I heard a sound like someone imitating the hoot of an owl coming from the direction of the other barn about 30 yards away to our right. I was so certain that it was a human making the noise that I called out, "Very funny, Dad." I assumed it was my father closing up the barn for the night, and he was taking the opportunity to try and spook me, but no one called back. It was at this point that my dog lifted his head from sniffing all over and froze, staring in the direction of the barn. His hair stood up along his spine, and he started to give a low, menacing growl. Now, this dog is obsessed with all people and animals. Everyone is a friend waiting to be made. I've never seen him act aggressively toward anything, even other dogs that have tried to fight him. My dad especially is his favorite person on the planet, so there's no way that he would have started growling at him. It was my turn for all the hair on my neck to stand up as a cold wave of fear hit me like a brick. My dog had stopped right at the edge of where the light met the darkness of the woods. Normally, the light gradually dissipated into the trees, still providing enough visibility to see the outlines of the trees and shrubs, but this time it ended with a solid wall of black. Suddenly, I heard the same fake owl sound from only a few feet away, just on the other side of the darkness. My dog jumped and immediately started barking, pulling himself between me and the sound. He's only a little guy, so I darted forward, scooped him up, and took off running toward the house. Behind me, I heard the sound again, but this time it had a strange warble to it, almost like laughter. The next morning, when I went out to check on the barn, I found the doors had been partially broken off the slide and were swung past each other the wrong direction, like someone had tried to force them open the wrong way. There were no signs of footprints in the sawdust or dirt or any other signs of an intruder. I have no idea what was out there that night, but suffice to say, my dog and I stay well within the floodlights when we go out after dark. I've been up since 5 a.m. and I just can't get this off my mind. So last night I'm sleeping and I'm having a nightmare that I'm in an apartment, looking into a kitchen area, and the drawers, cabinets, and a door to the pantry were all opening, closing, and moving by themselves, almost like poltergeist activity. I was scared in the dream, so I began praying, and then my wife, who was in bed next to me, kicked my foot and woke me up because I was clearly distressed and mumbling a lot in my sleep. And here's where things get weird. I jump awake because my wife kicked my foot, and feeling relieved to not be having a nightmare anymore, I turn my head towards my wife, who was laying beside me, and say, "Thank you, babe. Really sorry about that. I was having a nightmare." But I don't hear any response. So I figured that she's already fallen back to sleep, or might just be so tired that she's still kind of out of it. Then I turned my head back to facing forwards, the direction I was facing the whole time I was sleeping, and I noticed something in the corner of the room, standing in front of the bedroom door. The room was dark, but its skin still appeared to be like a dark matte gray color. It was really thin, had thin legs and long, thin arms, a small, almost childlike torso, a narrow neck, and then a really big, bulbous head with huge black almond-shaped eyes. It looked exactly like a traditional gray alien, but it was slightly transparent. Needless to say, I was shocked. And to be honest, my very first reaction was that I was seeing things because I just woke up. So I rubbed my eyes, and it's still right there. Trying not to panic and trying to come up with a rational explanation for it, I thought, this must just be dream chemicals still working in my brain. So I sit up slightly and look into the other corner of our bedroom by the closet, expecting to see something there too, but there's nothing. Then I look at the ceiling. Nothing. The floor, nothing. The other wall, nothing. I look back at the corner of the bedroom door, and it's still right there. Standing there completely still, just staring at me with its huge jet black eyes, which were shaped like almonds and appeared to wrap just slightly around the side of its head, much larger than a human's eyes. And it's still slightly transparent, but I'm seeing it clearly, and only in that one spot too, not anywhere else in the room. Now, because the Texas power grid sucks, I always sleep with a flashlight next to the bed, and after seeing this thing for about a minute and a half, it occurs to me to grab the flashlight. I lean off the bed, reach down and grab the flashlight and shine it in the corner of the room at this being. And because it's transparent, it became much less visible when I shined the light on it. I could still see it very slightly, but it was much less. Again, in disbelief at what I was seeing, I began slowly scanning the whole room with the flashlight. From the bed, of course. I wasn't going to try getting out of bed. I was too scared to even move, to be honest. And again, I see absolutely nothing strange anywhere in the room at all, except for this thing I can see in the one corner by the bedroom door. I turn the flashlight off, and instantly, I can see it super clearly again, just staring at me. I rub my eyes again and squeeze my eyes together tightly, hoping that when I opened them, it'd be gone. But it wasn't. So I finally began truly freaking out internally, and I just began praying out loud. And after about 20 seconds of praying, I literally watched this thing just fade out of existence, dematerialize right in front of me. It was still standing there, dead still, and staring at me the whole time. It just seemed to suddenly begin to become increasingly transparent until it was just not there anymore, and gone. I've been awake since then. Spent the rest of the night reading random stuff here on Reddit to try and distract myself because the experience shook me up quite a bit, to be honest. I was wondering if anyone else here has ever experienced something like this. I feel so genuinely weirded out that I just don't know what to make of it. I bought a black Labrador Retriever puppy back in 2009 because I got into waterfowl hunting, and I read all kinds of books on training and decided to train him myself. It became a routine that every day I would work with him before and after work. From the beginning, it was apparent that this dog was special. He was so quick to learn commands and was a breeze to train, looking back now after I had trained many other retrievers since. He started as just my hunting buddy for a year or so until I hunted with someone who was into retriever competitions. After a little coaxing, I was persuaded to enter my dog into a few competitions here and there and was actually able to get him titled as a junior hunter and started hunter in AKC and HRC when he was a year old. I lost interest in the competitions and eventually he just became my hunting buddy again. Over the years, he retrieved hundreds of ducks for me and spent countless hours out hunting with me. He went everywhere with me, slept inside, was a playmate to my young kids at the time, just a once-in-a-lifetime type of dog. In 2016, I let him out to use the bathroom and never saw him again. You see, I live in a rural area of Texas and I figured that he would just show back up soon, but he didn't. I searched for him for months, posting on Facebook, talking with neighbors. I even made flyers with a $1,000 reward and posted a business in town. It took me forever to let go and finally realize that he wasn't coming home. I own a cane Corso now, and last night, November 1st, 2021, I woke up to him barking, which he rarely does. I went downstairs to see what he was barking at. I flipped on my porch light and saw a black lab laying on my porch and immediately noticed the collar. A collar that I had gotten made for my lab, black leather with orange reflective circles around it. Now, I'm sure that there are other collars around like that, but this one had a special touch added by my kids, a pink strip of duct tape near the buckle. As soon as I saw the pink stripe, my heart skipped a beat. I didn't want to let my cane Corso get out as he's very protective, so I grabbed him by the collar and took him to the laundry room. I ran back to the door and opened it, and the dog was gone. I grabbed a flashlight and looked all over my yard for him, but couldn't find him anywhere. I stayed up and called for him for most of the night, but he never came. I still cannot figure this out, and I'm embarrassed to even say anything to anyone close to me because it sounds so far-fetched. He's been gone for over 5 years. Do you really think it was him? So I recently got a job at my local liquor store. My job is 5 minutes away from my place, and I honestly love this job because it's so chill, and since I'm a local, I already know many of the customers that come in on a regular basis. This job helped me get back into contact with a lot of people that I haven't seen for a few years. One day, an old friend, we'll call him Steve, from high school walks in, and he remembers me. We hadn't seen each other for a few years, so we had a nice talk and made plans to hang out with a mutual friend sometime in the near future. I remember we talked about how our mutual friend would do this thing where he would tell stories that sounded super fake and made up. For example, he told both of us a story about how he supposedly got shot in the leg, but the story was different every time. Anyway, I tell Steve that our mutual friend is like Paul Bunyan with his tall tales. Steve laughs and says, "Yeah, totally, bro, he's Paul Bunyan," and I remember he had bought some beatboxes, which are this alcoholic beverage that's pretty popular in my store. I remember the exact flavor that he had and everything, and I remember clearly asking him if those things were any good, and Steve tells me, yeah, they mess you up. Now, about a week later, I came into work and I see my coworker, Diane, and she's acting strange in a way that I suspect that she's going through something tough in her life. She asks me if I remember Steve, and I say yes, of course. She informs me that he had passed away. I asked if it was an overdose, and she told me that it was not an overdose, but also said that she felt it was not her place to tell me the real cause of death. Well, I think it over and decide that next time I see Diane, I would explain to her that I've known Steve since high school, and he's not just some local customer I met at work. So a few days pass, and I see Diane at shift change. Mind you, I work very late, from 9 p.m. to 2 a.m. usually. Before I get a chance to talk to her, the manager comes in, and Diane goes out to the front to talk to her. I let them have their girl talk for a few minutes, then I go outside to let the manager know that I need to quickly use the restroom. Well, when I go outside, I overhear Diane say something along the lines of, "Yeah, it's messed up that they would make the wife pay money to have the brains all over the place cleaned up." And the manager replied, yeah, she's gonna most likely be getting a bill for that cleanup." And when I heard this, I knew. I went back inside the store and I just felt so sad for my friend Steve. I just stared into space for a few minutes and went back outside to find Diane and the manager kind of staring at me as if though they knew that I heard what she said and were waiting for me to mention it. I chose not to and waited until I was alone with Diane to discuss the issue. I explained to her that me and Steve were high school friends, and she opened up to me after that. It turns out Diane had an ex who did the same thing a few years back. She really opened up to me about what was going on after this. She told me that Steve had just had a newborn 2 days before the incident and another boy who was about 4. Steve's longtime partner had been with him for 8 years straight without any major hitches, and Diane tells me that she had known both Steve and his girlfriend since the 1st grade. They all grew up together. She tells me that she was driving the car with Steve's girlfriend in the back seat, and she was finally able to get some sleep in the back seat as Diane was driving. Well, then the 4-year-old decides to ask where his dad is and why he can't see him anymore. They told the child that he's with God now. It's so terribly sad because the poor child thinks God kidnapped his dad and now he's mad at God. Well, this is where things get strange. That night I went to restock beverages in the back. It was around 1 a.m. and I suddenly had this sensation that I wasn't alone, and it actually felt as if though I was with someone I knew. But I couldn't see them. I had a feeling my buddy might try to send me a message. I thought to myself, if I see anything, I would try my best not to get scared and pass on whatever message I receive if possible. Well, I grabbed the exact same beverage that I sold him last time I saw him and put it onto a shelf. I bent over to pick up something else, and the drink that I had just put on the shelf got smacked very loudly to the ground, as if someone was frustrated or angry and hit it. This made me very uncomfortable, and I ended up calling some friends to come chill with me for the rest of my shift. I even took a few shots of whiskey to calm me down. Later that night after work, I told my mom what had happened, and she explained to me that he may have been frustrated and angry at his own sad decision and the fact that it was too late to change it. My mom is a Buddhist, so she gives me a Buddhist prayer to play at work to bring positive energy. I play the prayer at work the next day, and she also comes to accompany me for my part of the shift. During the prayer, a foam cup also got thrown by nothing, and my mom and I both saw it. However, this time it felt like a much more peaceful action without anger behind it, almost as if he was saying that he heard the prayer. My mom told me that she felt that this was him trying to communicate. In my opinion, the prayer did what it was supposed to, and I feel as if though he left peacefully and the foam cup being lightly tossed was his way of saying, "Hey man, sorry I scared you the other day, but it's time for me to go." I miss my buddy, and I hope anyone who reads this that is going through tough times in life gets through it and chooses to live on. Taking your own life is never the right path, guys. It will only lead to more pain for everyone involved. I gave birth to my baby at 26 weeks almost 2 weeks ago, but something happened during the birth that I can't stop thinking about. I don't know if this is normal or not, but I've decided to share it here to see if anyone else has experienced something similar. During labor, I wasn't on any strong drugs, just morphine along with gas and air, which shouldn't make anyone delirious. I know this because I had the same combination during the birth of my daughter 3 years ago, and that was fine. Towards the end, right before I pushed him out and the pain was becoming intense, a young man in a white shirt, blue jeans, and dark hair entered the room. I initially turned away from the door to talk to my fiancé, but he walked over and stood beside him. I then asked both the midwife and my fiancé if they could ask him to leave, as I wanted only us in the room. The response was, "No one else is here." However, he was. He was standing right there. I saw his face and I didn't recognize him. I remember exactly what he was wearing, and he just stared at me for a solid minute or so before leaving, and shortly after that, I delivered my son. The direction he walked in was towards the room where they take the baby for checks and dressing and to look better considering the circumstances, but this man definitely went to the room where my son was going. I'm writing this because today I saw a TikTok video of a lady going through something similar during an emergency C-section, with it being her dad who passed away in 2008. However, I still don't know who this man was. Describing it again to my fiancé, he's certain that it could have been his grandfather who passed away young from being murdered, but we're still so unsure. Am I crazy for thinking it was a spirit coming to guide my son to a safer place? Could it have been my son's soul showing how he was going to look? I honestly don't know, and it hasn't left my mind at all. A few years ago, I was woken up one Sunday morning by a phone call. It was a little girl, I'd guess maybe 4 years old. "Good morning, Granddad." I laughed. She sounded sweet and then gently explained to her that she'd dialed the wrong number. "Oh," she said before hanging up. A few minutes later, the phone rings again. "Morning, Granddad." I laughed again and apologetically told her that she'd dialed the wrong number again. "Are you coming, Granddad? What time are you coming? Hurry up, we're about to get started." She was absolutely bursting with joy, and whoever her granddad was obviously a very lucky guy. It sounded like there was a birthday party or something going on. Still laughing, I tried to explain her mistake to her and said that obviously I'm not her granddad before saying bye and hanging up the phone. I lay in bed laughing, and a minute later, the phone rings. "Morning, Granddad." For the third time, I explain I'm not her granddad. "You are my granddad, silly," she said with a funny tone. She thought I was her granddad playing some trick on her, and she thought it was funny. And again, I explained to her that I'm not her granddad, at which point she drops the phone and runs off into the background. I could hear her in the background saying, "Dad, Granddad's playing tricks on me. He won't talk to me." I could hear that she was getting slightly upset at this point. Then the man picks up the phone. "Dad, is everything okay?" the man says. So I, still finding this whole thing kind of funny, explained to the man that his daughter has simply dialed the wrong number a few times and it's all a big misunderstanding. And then he says in a concerned tone, "Okay, Dad, are you at home? Stay where you are. We're on our way over, okay?" And now he thinks I'm his dad. So again, not laughing anymore, I explained that I'm not who he thinks he is. Obviously, then it's just the wrong number. What he said next scared the crap out of me. He said, "My name." "I'm really worried now. We'll be over in 15 minutes. Don't move." At this point, I just hung up the phone and lay in bed wondering what in God's name was happening. They never called back, and I had assumed that I was just being pranked by a friend or something. Over the next few days, I asked everybody I knew to own up to that prank. Everybody swore blind that it wasn't them. Not only was this girl convinced that I was her granddad, but the man also thought I was his dad and also said my actual first name. Obviously, coincidences happen, but this was just weird. So a few days later, still puzzled, I thought that I'd just ring the number back and see who answered. The number wasn't in use. I just got a dead tone. Weird, huh? I think I was called by a grandkid in some sort of parallel universe or something, and judging by the sound of her voice, the parallel me was one lucky guy. I started working at a convenience store back in the 90s. Shortly before that, the owner's son was working and a man rushed in to ask for a knife. He'd been in a car accident and his girlfriend couldn't get her seatbelt off. Owner's son turned around to grab the bagel knife, and by the time he turned back, the dude was dead on the floor. His seatbelt had done something to his esophagus, crushed it, I believe, and while adrenaline helped, he suffocated and died right there at the register. I didn't know this when I started working there. I found out after I asked about the things that I was experiencing. I'd get kicked or poked in the leg or shoulder while nobody was behind me. I'd walk through cold patches that had moved through the store, see the reflection of someone in the cooler door but turn around to see nobody there. I felt like I was being watched while I was in the cooler filling sodas. But the knife, the bagel knife, while working by myself on camera with nobody else there, that knife would be gone the minute I turned around, and then I'd find it back a bit later, maybe somewhere else. The other staff said similar things were happening to them. The overnight shift was one person, and often the store was empty. The people who worked the shift heard whistling sometimes, but mostly they heard crying. Turns out the girlfriend was a teacher at my high school. I started talking to him while I worked, and I'd let him know that she was okay, she survived, and he can let it go. And things started to calm down. I stopped getting poked, and the knife stayed where I left it. It was definitely the most intense experience I've ever had. So yesterday was my 29th birthday. It was overall terrible. Once all the kids were settled in bed, my spouse and I sat down to watch TV, and he ended up falling asleep. Closer towards midnight, everything from the day finally hit me, and I began sobbing, like real ugly crying. From where I was sitting on my couch, I can see into my whole dining room, open concept doorway with a 2-foot lip that comes down from the ceiling that has a little shelf for pictures, and through the kitchen doorway to my back door. The TV was the only thing lighting up the house. Last week when my daughter finished school, I bought her 3 balloons that were scattered across the house. One to my left, one wedged between fan blades in the dining room, it was off, and one right next to a dining room chair, right by the kitchen doorway. I had been crying, but I thought I saw a small flash in the dining room. I wasn't sure if the TV light reflected off one of my kids' toys or not. I kept staring that way when I noticed the balloon string closest to the kitchen was moving around. As I was staring, I saw the balloon string slowly start to glide across the floor towards me. We do have central air which was on, but none of the other balloons had been moving, even the strings. It kept coming closer and closer, but I figured it was going to stop because of the little lip that drops down between the 2 rooms. It stopped for a moment once it hit that point. I watched the balloon slowly lower down, bopping up against the little shelf and come into the living room. At this point, honestly, I stopped crying and was more or less just soiling my pants. It continued to glide across the room, coming directly toward me. It stopped once it was in front of me and then shifted to the left a little bit, and the string hit my left hand. I didn't know what to do. I was shocked. I was frozen. The balloon shifted in front of me again, then proceeded to shift left again, and the string came up and hit my hand. And at that point, the only thing I could think to do was grab the string and hold on to it. I kept trying to reach over and nudge my husband to wake up. I finally got his attention, and when he came to, he asked me why I was holding a balloon. I told him what happened, and all he had to say was that he wished he was awake so he could have seen how scared I was. Anyways, I had a terrible birthday, and I think someone or something from the other side wanted to make sure that I at least got a balloon to celebrate. So around 11 years ago, I was a telecoms engineer. A typical day involved visiting several residential houses to either install or repair phone lines. Everything seemed no different from any other day, but then I received my next job assignment, and it was a 20-line installation. Now, this wasn't the norm for the role that I had because these tasks usually went to other teams. No issues. I thought that it would be nice to spend more than just an hour or 2 in one place, rather than here and there. I called the contact, which was a contact center, and they informed me that either the caretaker or manager of the building was aware of the job's requirements and would explain what was needed. So I arrived at the location, and it turned out to be a really old building built in the 1920s, as I later found out. I made my way inside with my tester and tool bag, as was customary, and after speaking with the receptionist, I discovered that the building had once been a nursing home, and after being derelict for a few years, was now being used as offices for various businesses. As promised, 2 managers arrived and told me that they believed what I was looking for was in the cellar, as there were a lot of cables down there, but that's all they knew. So I asked if the caretaker was around, as they usually have knowledge of such things, and I was told that he wasn't available because he was ill but would be back the next day. I followed a man and a woman to a numbered padlocked door. They opened it and provided me with the access code. On the other side of the door, there was a stairwell that led down to the cellar. As we descended, I noticed that the lighting was very poor, extremely poor in fact, and I had no chance of working in these conditions. There were lights, yes, but they were pendant lights and not very effective. Understanding my concern, the woman informed me that they had hanging lights, so there was no problem. I returned to my van, grabbed an extension cord, and headed back towards the cellar. As I passed the receptionist, she asked, "Are you going to be in the cellar on your own?" I replied, "Yeah, sometimes you have to, but if what I'm looking for isn't there, I won't be there for very long." And she laughed, but commented, "I'd rather you than me. Nobody likes going down there, even for storage space." To be honest, I just thought people didn't like going down in dark stairwells. No big deal, it was something that I was familiar with, so it just needed to be done. After a quick look around with the male manager, we found a socket. I set up the lights, and there it was, the DP I was looking for. However, it was an old solder block, not suitable for broadband, so I informed him that this would take a bit longer, and this was before even knowing where these 20 lines even needed to go. He agreed and showed me where the office fitters had left all the cables for the clients, which, to my relief, were in the cupboard behind the receptionist. With all the information I needed, I got to work. I tested all the lines, and things were going well. More than half of them were going to the cabinet, with a few remaining. However, I knew the area and knew that from there I could get them through, as there were 200 pair cables running through it. By this point, it was around 4 o'clock. I didn't have the blocks I needed in my van, so I tagged the cables and turned off all the lights on my way out before closing and locking the door. I signed out and told the girl at the desk that I'd see her tomorrow, and then I left. On my way home, I called my manager to explain the situation, that I might need assistance for at least half a day, or possibly more, as I wasn't even sure if anything had been done in the exchange. The next day at 8 a.m., I received a call from one of the other engineers who told me that he would be with me all day, but he didn't know the details yet. We divided our roles. I would push the pairs from the box of the cabinet, and he would handle the cabinet in exchange if necessary. Then it was just a matter of fitting the box and running a large internal cable from the box to behind the receptionist's area. I returned to the building, entered with the access code, and to my surprise, all the lights were on. I was 100% sure that I had turned them off, so I assumed that one of the managers had come to check if I was still there and had left the lights on by mistake. I went down and did what I needed to do, left to push the cables outside, and called my colleague, who was getting them one by one, so things were going well. I finished up and went back to fit the block. I grabbed the blocks, drilled all the necessary holes, and set everything up. As I was marking pilot holes, I heard a voice saying, "What are you doing?" I nearly jumped out of my skin, but when I turned, I saw a man in gray overalls. I asked if he was the caretaker, to which he replied in the affirmative. He expressed surprise that nobody had been down there for years. I continued with my work, drilling and all, and as soon as I stopped using the drill and it got quieter, the man started chatting again. He asked about my favorite football team and whether he could watch what I was doing. I assured him that was no problem and tried to be as polite as possible. He introduced himself as Gordon and mentioned that he had been working there for over 30 years. A bit confused, I recalled what the receptionist had said about the building being empty for a few years, and from the looks of the cabling, it hadn't been updated for at least 15 to 20. Gordon simply stated that things were always happening there. After about an hour of conversation while I was working, I heard a hello from the top of the stairwell. Expecting Gordon to respond, I didn't reply, and then I heard it again. I turned around, but Gordon had disappeared. I thought I had been chatting for 10 minutes, and he wasn't even there. I went back up, and it was one of the managers asking if I was expecting someone, another engineer. I apologized and explained that the phone signal was poor down there, so he probably couldn't reach me. With that cleared up, he came down and we chatted for a bit, and he mentioned that he would start at the receptionist's end and work his way towards me while I finished up. After a quick bathroom break, I went down to the cellar. I was in the final stages now, just putting phone numbers to pairs so that when my colleague arrived, we could connect the test and go. As I was doing this, I heard a voice say, "Sorry about that." Again, out of nowhere, it was Gordon. I acknowledged him, called him clever, and made a joke that if they couldn't find him, they couldn't ask him to do anything. I continued for another 5 minutes, and I had done all I could, so I told him that I was heading up to assist my colleague and would be done soon, out of the way. Gordon told me that he liked the company and that it had been nice to talk. I felt a bit sad at this point, thinking that maybe he had been treated poorly by the people in the building, so I said, "Of course, mate, it costs nothing to be nice and have a chat." I went up the stairs, leaving Gordon down there, and helped get the cable through a void and into the cellar. After about 10 to 20 minutes of trying to thread it through, we succeeded, and we went back down. Gordon was nowhere to be found, and we finished our work. My colleague informed me that it was time for food, and he would go to the fish and chip shop and meet me back at the yard. I told him I just needed a few signatures to ensure that the lights were turned off so I could retrieve my extension cord. I obtained the necessary signatures from the manager and showed him where the link was behind the reception. I also informed him that I needed to retrieve my extension cord, so were the lights okay for now, or did he want to move them as we went since there was good lighting? And he replied that the lights might as well stay on for now, and he would get another extension cord in case anyone else needed to go down there. I went down and started unplugging the lights, and once again, Gordon appeared, telling me that he didn't realize that the lights were mine, otherwise he wouldn't have touched them. Immediately I thought, so that's why they were on this morning. But then it occurred to me, the door, it was locked? I asked him if he had come down yesterday evening, and he said, "Yes, of course, I'm always here. It's where I'm needed." Confused and wanting to leave, I said, "No worries, nice to meet you," and extended my hand for a handshake, and he raised his hand and replied, "Hope to see you soon." So I left, signed out, and didn't think much of it. Then a week passed, and I received a call from our control center asking if I could return to that same address because one of the lines wasn't working and it was a high priority issue. I agreed and got there, greeted the receptionist again, and asked if I could check behind her desk before going down to the cellar. To my relief, I found what I was looking for. It just hadn't been connected properly. While I was fixing it, an older guy asked me if I had been there the previous week. I said yes, and he apologized, explaining that he was the caretaker and had to take more days off than planned. I reassured him, saying, "Oh, don't worry about it. I'm sure Gordon will tell you everything." And as soon as I mentioned Gordon, the man looked at me intently and asked, "What did you just say?" I replied, "Gordon? He told me he's the caretaker here." The man turned pale and asked if we could talk outside, so I followed him. He asked me if I believe in ghosts and then proceeded to tell me that before the building became what it is today, it was a nursing home, and the old caretaker was a man named Gordon. He knew this because when the building was taken over, he found an old desk with to-do lists, letters, and requests addressed to Gordon. Furthermore, there was a sign on the door that said caretaker, and behind the door was the entrance to the cellar. I initially dismissed this and laughed, thinking that he and his friend were pulling my leg. However, he then asked if Gordon was wearing overalls, to which I replied affirmatively. He looked me straight in the eye and said, "Listen, mate, I'm not lying. Gordon passed away years ago, supposedly while on the job. I just thought you should know because it's not something that's considered funny." He told me that he had also seen Gordon, but people never believed him. I didn't mention this to anyone beyond that point until one night while fishing with a friend. Just as the caretaker had said, my friend thought I was joking. But I know what I saw, and I know what I heard. I don't tell this to anybody because it's not worth the ridicule, hence why I'm using this throwaway account. But I can tell you, ghosts and spirits are real. For as long as I've known my wife, she's mentioned growing up in a haunted house. I always assumed that she was joking because she always brought it up in quite a lighthearted way and never went into much detail. It was a big old house, and I figured that she was talking about weird old house noises. The house belonged to her great aunt, who raised my wife for most of her childhood. Her great aunt recently passed away, and her great aunt's daughter, whom my wife calls her aunt, though technically she's her second cousin or something, I'll be referring to her as her aunt, now owns the house. After my wife's great aunt passed, we went to stay in the house for 4 nights to attend the funeral and spend some time with my wife's family, as we live in another state. When we got there, my wife and her aunt were chatting and mentioned that they thought my wife's great aunt might join the ghosts already haunting the house. I still didn't consider that they might actually be serious. The first night we spent there, I woke up in the middle of the night and noticed someone standing in the corner of the room beside the door. Thinking it was my wife, I asked what she was doing. This woke up my wife, who was actually sleeping beside me. I said I thought I saw someone in the room with us, but it must just be my eyes playing tricks on me. She said, "The person in the corner next to the door? Yeah, don't worry about it." It almost made me angry. I thought that there was some creep in the room and my wife was too sleepy to process what was happening. I grabbed my phone to call the police, but when my phone lit up the room, I saw that there was no one there. There wasn't even a weird shape that I might have mistaken for a person. The door was closed, so it wasn't like there could have been someone there who left the room in the moments that I was looking away to grab my phone. My wife told me it was common to see shadowy people in the night, but I shouldn't worry because they don't do anything. She fell back asleep right after that, but I just lay there awake the whole night, wondering what had just happened. The next morning I asked my wife about it, and she said she wasn't kidding about the house being haunted. People who spend the night in the house regularly see and hear ghosts, but they never hurt anyone or caused any problems. I remained skeptical even after the next night, which had been after the funeral, and my wife and aunt both reported that they'd been visited in their dreams by my wife's great aunt. And so far in my mind, everything was weird but explainable. The figure in the room could have been a strange trick of the light. My wife and her aunt had just attended the funeral of their loved one, and it made sense for them both to dream about her that night. The third night, I was kept awake for hours by the constant sound of footsteps pacing around the house. My wife also heard them, but said it was normal and I shouldn't worry, and she fell asleep easily. A few times during the night I got up to look around for the source of the noise. I even did a couple of laps of the outside of the house in case there was someone outside, and I never saw anyone walking around. At one point I was in the lounge room and heard footsteps from the kitchen and called out to ask if there was anyone there. My wife's aunt opened her bedroom door and said that she could hear the footsteps too, and just like my wife, she told me it was normal and there was no cause for concern. Then, there was the sound of a drawer opening in the kitchen, which we both reacted to, and I went to check and found the cutlery drawer open. My wife's aunt, who'd come to the kitchen too, simply closed the drawer, commented with mild annoyance that the ghosts are always leaving things open, and went back to bed, leaving me to my existential crisis. I could not come up with a way to explain that away. We both heard the footsteps, both heard the drawer open at the same time, and there was no one there, and no way out of the kitchen except for past us. I tried staying on the couch to try and catch the mystery walker, and there was multiple times I heard the footsteps pass through the lounge room, but I never saw anything. Eventually I gave up and went back to bed. Nothing really happened the final night, though we woke up to several cabinets open and no one remembered leaving them open, though that could be explainable by someone just forgetting or even sleepwalking. Even so, the footsteps still bothered me, and the shadowy person from the first night and cabinets opened on the final night made me nervous in light of everything that happened on the third night. Up until now, I've always scoffed at the idea of the paranormal, but I just can't reconcile my experiences in that house with my skepticism. Talking to my wife's family revealed that everyone who stayed in the house believes it's haunted because they've had at least one completely unexplainable experience there. They all report that the ghosts leave people alone for the most part, though some who lived there for a long time as children, including my wife and her aunt, have described meeting people they thought were probably ghosts and having positive but strange interactions with them. Back in the day when she was alive, we promised to haunt each other should one or the other leave this life. We both firmly believed in an afterlife and spirits, so this wasn't just a silly joking promise, even if there was some teasing about how we would do it to each other. I actually think we only said it twice. Well, it had been 2 years since my wife had passed away. I recalled being in the room that she died. The machines were breathing for her, and I just felt her leave her body, just gone with the sound of the machine still going. A few hours later, they were officially turned off. Now, a little back information, my wife had an eating disorder, and this disorder destroyed a lot of her gut and organs. It was a slow, painful death. When I say I felt her leave, it was like a bullet fast type of leave. In life, I didn't yell, never called each other names, and rarely argued, and when we did, it was a healthy discourse and decisions were made to settle it. I knew her eating disorder had caused these problems, but what I didn't know was how much worse it really was. I found the information on her phone after death. She knew death was the final outcome years before I knew and held back the information from me, letting me talk about growing old together. In short, I haven't seen her. Now, long post coming to an end, fast forward 2 years, and I'm thinking of her. Alone in my kitchen, I was overcome with the intense grief, and for the first time, I got enraged. I shouted, "You did this to me, and you did this to yourself, and I'm the one living with it. I hate what you've done to me." Immediately in my brain, from ear to ear, I hear her voice shout back, "Well, it's about time." I felt 1,000 moving tingles going on inside my head. Needless to say, I cried the hardest I had ever done in 2 years since her passing. I fell asleep on my mom's living room couch with the TV on. I tucked my phone under the pillow under my head. It feels like an hour had passed, and I feel my phone vibrating like someone is calling me, and I look at it, and it's from Peanut. I answer and sleepily say, "Hello?" My dad comes through the other end, staticky but very clearly him, and says, "Hey," like he always did, with a bit of surprise in his voice, like, wow, it worked. I say, "Oh my God, hey." And he says, "My phone isn't working," or "I couldn't get my phone to work," implying that's why he called me from Peanut's phone. He says, "I've been trying to call everyone. I just wanted to tell you I love you and I'm safe." He goes on to say that I'm in room 4, and it was a 3-digit number, definitely beginning in a 4. I tell him I love him too, and I'm glad he's safe, and I ask him to repeat the last part again because I didn't hear the room number part. He says that "I love you and I'm safe" again, and then said the room number again. Once again, I couldn't make it out because it got too staticky and the TV was too loud. I say, "I love you too, Dad." And I don't remember the call ending, but I remember waking up in the exact environment I was in, dream, thinking, what just happened? A few other details. He sounded kind of like he did when he was sick on the phone, but definitely improved a bit. I was watching Family Feud when I fell asleep, and infomercials played on that channel when it ends, and an infomercial was what was too loud in my dream, and the same one was playing when I woke up as in the dream. and no one in my family has any idea who Peanut may be. My mom and I went camping in the woods of northern Wisconsin. When we arrived at the campground, we were the only people there, which was weird by itself, sure. Everything went semi-normal until our tent filled to the brim with spiders and we ended up sleeping in the car. It was about 2 to 3 a.m. and I was wide awake because I was just restless and almost paranoid someone was out there in the woods. I looked out the left rear window when I saw a large portal open. I couldn't believe my eyes, so I pinched and slapped myself to make sure I wasn't dreaming. I wasn't. I could feel the pain as I watched the portal getting larger and wider, about 7 to 8 feet tall. It was this bluish green, almost like Rick and Morty, ironically. And immediately after this, I woke up my mom to see if she could see what I was seeing too. And she did, and freaked out a bit and said, "Don't move and be quiet." I saw one humanoid figure come out with a lantern. He looked around and then gestured to the others to come out, and I would say 5 to 6 people came out, almost in a sort of Amish Mennonite sort of clothing. They all had lanterns as well. They gathered around each other and seemed to talk, then one by one they all entered the woods in single file line. The first man to walk out of that portal was the one to go back in the portal. After he got in, the portal closed and we watched the humanoids walk into the woods until we couldn't see their light anymore. My mom immediately started the car and we left in complete silence, and silent the entire car ride back to Illinois. Ever since then, both my mom and I had been avid believers of the paranormal and aliens. I'm wondering if anyone has ever seen anything like this before or experienced it before, because I know this sounds absolutely insane, but I swear it happened.